Good morning. We appreciate your presence. We have those that are visiting with us, and we're glad that you've come our way, and hope that any opportunity that you'll have, that you'll come back to be with us. As we came in this morning, it's very noticeable to me that not all Christians are meeting this morning. Several empty buildings. I mean, this is the New Year's, and I never thought of the fact that people would actually choose to do something on Sunday other than go to church and use a holiday to miss church, but some people are. And I think it says something about the audience here that you've got your priorities right, that you're here to worship God and to hopefully learn more about how He'd have us live and try to mature ourselves and improve ourselves. As always, for me, since I don't get a chance to speak too many oftentimes as far as preaching, it's always somewhat difficult for me to always come up with a subject sometimes. And then sometimes when I do come up with a subject that I decide to speak on, I start having misgivings towards the closer I get to it. I think, I probably could have done something else. I've had several people, suggest this to me. That maybe we need to talk about modesty. And I thought that was a good subject. I'd done this before maybe 7 or 8 years ago, but I thought maybe this is not really the best time to spend talking about that. But hopefully we will discuss that, because there are issues and things that we need to address. I had thought of this one about all things being done decently and in order, and I thought that would be a good topic. But then I realized it's New Year's Eve, and I've always wanted to do a New Year's Eve resolution sermon. And so as I began to look at this, we obviously, as a nation, this is almost a ritual that a lot of us every year on the new year, as a way of starting it off, is we go on a self-improvement kick. Statistically, about half of the population of the United States makes some kind of a resolution. And what I read is that by February, most of those resolutions are already broken and gone. And we all struggle with certain things. Weight has always been one of my problems. And, I think that they said that the average American gains 6 to 8 pounds during Thanksgiving, Christmas time. And, I could concur with that. I always wonder what we're thinking. We add butter and sugar and chocolate and nuts and wonder why do we gain weight. But that's what happens. And so when I look at that and how we always are looking for trying to improve ourselves, I try to look at some other resolutions that many people make. Health kicks. Several months ago, Darren said something to me about he and Nancy were going to get a Fitbit. And I had gotten a Fitbit before, and I had to literally get rid of my Fitbit. And the reason is I became obsessed with it. It says do 10,000 a day. Well, if 10,000 steps a day is good, how about 12,000 or 14,000 or 16,000? And I found myself in competition all the time, and I told him I knew how competitive he was and how fastidious he is about details and things. I could just see him getting out of control with that. And I said, I don't know if that's a good idea. When mine broke, I didn't buy another Fitbit because, I think I'd worked up one day when I was cutting a lot of grass, pushing and walking and stuff, something like 30-something thousand steps. And it became competitive. And with the health kicks that we have, a lot of people make a resolution that they're going to exercise more this year and they're going to try to take care of things from a fitness standpoint, and that becomes an obsession. Addictions and habits. I put Diet Coke up there because my wife gets on to me all the time about Diet Coke. I don't know if y'all saw this, but I think CNN actually had 2 experts get up there and talk about the bad things of Diet Coke and what it could cause. And when they got through with them talking about that, they said, what is it in the Diet Coke that does that? And they said, we don't know. And they didn't like that answer. So that night they brought in another expert. And she went through all the bad things they think may cause this. They said, what's in it that does that? And they said, we don't know. Now, I do know this, and I believe that anybody that I was thinking Ken Woodard is that if you take Diet Coke and you've got a corroded battery and you pour it on the acid that's going up there, it will make it dissolve. So that's pretty good. That's a pretty good indication it may be Diet Coke. But when Diet Coke first came out, it said don't drink your calories on it. Don't drink your calories. Drink water or drink something. And there was a time when supposedly that was pretty good. Work. I kind of put this picture here because it kind of reminded me a little bit of Andrew, but some of us get completely overcome with work where things are just out of our control. And we say we're going to do a better job of managing our time. And we plan on doing that, and we work at it, and yet it still ends up being work. Technology. I think we all realize that we have problems in that. I'm trying to get on board with a few things. Texting, emailing occasionally, every once in a while sending a picture. Darren and Rusty and Alan and I are on the same page when it comes to texting. And we will have these discussions. It'll come up, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm going like this, and the little bubbles are coming up from each of them. And by the time I get through composing, they've already moved on to a new subject because I'm not fast enough to get it done. But technologically, I think there's been kind of a public service announcement now that basically says, we need to put our devices down in certain situations. This is not always a good thing. Obviously, there are good things there, but there are problems for some of the young folks here. Grades are a problem for some folks, and perhaps that may be the thing that you've made a resolution. I'm going to be better at my grades. I'm going to do a better job at school, and that sort of thing. I can tell you when I was in school, a D was just fine because that meant that they passed me. Finances, especially with the new tax reform and stuff, there's a lot of questions and a lot of that kind of stuff, and people are wondering how can I do a better job of finances, which would take a lot of pressure off of us when it comes to the things that we spend our time thinking about. For some folks, we maybe think about some of the people that we are involved with, evil companions. There are some relationships with some people that are toxic. And we need to realize that, and I think that's a good resolution. Maybe there's sometimes some people that maybe we need to rid ourselves of those people and put ourselves with folks that would help us. But as I began to look at these things, one of the things that I really thought about is when making these resolutions, have we thought about serving God better this year than we did last year? Sometimes we get so caught up in this life, in this world, that we don't really sometimes maybe think about that. And hopefully this year we can make that resolution. And one of the things that I was going to put this at the conclusion, but I'll go ahead and say it now, I may come back to it. One of the things that I read is one reason people make their resolutions and then break them is because sometimes it's too big of a jump or it's more things than they can possibly do, and so they get kind of defeated by it. For me, if I want to lose weight, if I go out and run enough miles that I can control my weight. Well, I found this out a long time ago. You have to run 18 miles to burn one caloric, I get it right here in a minute, caloric pound. 18 miles, so you can say I really lost 1 pound. Now, you may sweat off a lot more, but how many people want to run 18 miles? I mean, that's 4/5 of a marathon for you to lose 1 pound. And so, now I've always thought that was one good way to manage weight, and I think that it is, but the truth, I think it helps. But it's a lot easier not to eat it than it is to try to run it off. But how can we serve God better and maybe look at some realistic ways that maybe we can do some things and make some changes in our lives and try to become better at doing that this year? So how do I serve God better this year? Well, one thing I'm going to suggest to you, and I think we're always inundated with all these things that we can help and that we can do that's outside of the church, but I want to suggest to you that the local church here is the vehicle. I actually took a thing down. I couldn't help but think of the song by the Ides of March, I'm Your Vehicle. And back in 1970, and a lot of the young kids are going, what? Some of the older folks probably remember that. But, it says, I'll take you anywhere you want to go. The local church is designed through God's wisdom for us to find work. And so maybe this year we can think about ways that through the things that we have going on here and the people that we are here with, how can we serve better? How can we find and use those opportunities? And many of us do. But the question is can I go a little further? Or perhaps I've let some things slide. But that's what I want to try to imprint on your mind this morning. It's true that all works and acts of kindness shouldn't be solely done for the benefit of the members of the churches of Christ. But it should be the first consideration. Seemed like we had a group meeting several years back, and somebody was suggesting that there were some things that were outside the auspices of the church here and the things that we could all do together. And someone in the meeting said, "But we got work here that we can't find people to do. But we're going to go to this place or do that." And sometimes I think we can get caught up into that sort of thing because there's a need or there's a problem on every day of people that need things and stuff. But what I want us to think about is how can we consider each other and prefer each other and to have the esteem for each other in this congregation, that when some information comes to us, that we have a plan of action, that we can help and we can do the things that God would want us to do. Now, there's two scriptural metaphors used to describe the church in this light, I believe. One is it's used as us being parts of the body, and the other one talks about us as being living stones. So when we talk about the body of Christ, obviously we're talking in the local sense of these folks that are in here. And so I want to think about that. And the other one, the living stones, is this idea of a spiritual house. And so I'd like to look at these two things and see if we can look at these and see if we can make some resolutions about how we can improve that. As we know, the church is the body of Christ. Christ is the head. Now, that's a simple verse, but it says so much because most of us, common sense, know that what happens down here is controlled by is what here. Hopefully that's what happens. A player of mine that a lot of y'all know, and some of the younger folks in here maybe had as a teacher, Willie White, has been attacked by a disease that basically has rid him of his ability to function. I've had a chance to see him and visit with him a couple of times, and he recently has begun to get a little better, but his mind has not having any control of his body right now. And I hope y'all will keep him in your prayers. But generally speaking, for most of us, the fact that we breathe, even though we don't consciously do that, we have a part of our brain that automatically does that for us. Because wouldn't you hate to think that you would have to go and think about each breath that you take, or when you blink, or any of the others? There's some natural things. But Christ is the head, and He controls the body. Now, members are baptized in that body and added to Him. I put the number 7 up there because one of the things that is confusing sometimes is there are 7, by some scholars, 7 different kinds of baptism mentioned in the Bible. You've got baptism by fire, baptism by the Holy Spirit. You've got John's baptism. You have what people refer to sometimes as the believer's baptism, which of those that we read about in Acts 2. But I'm not really getting into the number there. But the point is that sometimes that kind of stuff can be confusing. But one of the things that we all share in here as members is we all have done this. And we've done this for the same reason that the Bible, and that's one of those things that joins us together because we are put into this body. And when we're put into this body, God basically has made Christ the head of the church, and He should guide our every action. He should guide our thoughts. What we do and the things that we make decisions about every day, He should be behind that. There is one body and one Spirit, and even as are called in one hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, and notice it says one baptism. Even though through the Bible you can find, I think some of the baptisms these people are talking about when they say 7 are actually purification acts that goes in the Old Testament. But it's one baptism. And this one baptism, when done the right way and done for the right reason, I remember one thing that Brother Kyle Ellison said in his sermon. It says, you can't be taught the wrong thing and end up doing the right thing. And sometimes people go through different acts of baptism and sprinkling and things, but they're not what the Bible has given us. But that joins us together. We have that one Father, that one God who is above all, through all, and in you all. And so we work on these principles here. Now, the body parts, I had a great biology teacher, and I've known for a long time that 206 bones is what everybody has. We have 76 organs. We've got ligaments and tendons, so numerous that not only they actually say that they can't tell you how many ligaments and tendons, but it composes about 20% of your body weight. David, you were talking about being overweight this morning, and when I was younger, my mother used to say I had big bones. If she'd been smarter, she says it's all those ligaments and tendons. It's they're just bigger than everybody else's. But when you think about it, these compose our eyes, our nose, our mouth, our ears, our hands, our feet, our legs. But it's the impulses from the head that controls all these and their functions. And so as we look at these, what I consider very descriptive and very effective ways of looking at the body and how it works together, if Devin was here, I would talk about the Achilles tendon because he damaged that really badly. It snapped on him, I think. Imagine if you lose some of your tendons and your ligaments and how awful those things are. And maybe you can understand the importance of what are some of the seemingly smallest things, even down to the cells, is all their function works together. Colossians 2:16, and not holding fast to the head, from whom the entire body being supplied and held together by the joints and ligaments grows with a growth which is from God. Ephesians, but speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in all aspects into Him, who is the head, even Christ, from whom the whole body being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies according to the proper working of every individual part, causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. What a beautiful picture. I mean, the idea of how this all works together, how we all work together, how there's strength and unity, and how necessary, even sometimes what we consider the smallest things about us, how important they are. I think we all sometimes realize that something doesn't seem very important until it's gone. And so when we think about the body and we think of the members and us making up the church, in this case the local church, how important every member in this congregation is. One of the things that hit me kind of hard, I'm really bad about missing words, especially in text. Donna was sick. I get a text. Somebody says they're going to bring us food. I said, somebody's bringing food. She says, when? I says, tonight. And so I didn't have to worry about food. So I'm waiting. Now it's dark. Donna says, are you sure that this is when we're supposed to get the food? So I go back to my phone. I look up the text. There's a word, tomorrow, that I missed. And when I was looking at this passage of Corinthians, and it was talking about different things in 1 Corinthians 25 through 26, it talks about that it had kind of a hierarchy of the apostles first, and the prophets and teachers were second. But if you look at that verse, down in the bottom of 28, it's talking about that after that, there's miracles and gifts of healings, and then there's this little word thrown in there called helps. And I missed that word. Matter of fact, when I looked at it, it was such a strange looking, out of context thing, I kept reading it again. And reading about helps. Well, what does that mean? How many people are not apostles or not teachers or not this or that, not pastors or whatever? How many people in the congregation are helps? And I couldn't help but think when I first became a deacon here, I was put in charge of the baptistry right there, and so I started trying to find out what that meant. what does you mean? And somebody said, well, don't worry about it because Cotton Crawford, he takes care of it. You just check in with him. And then I think I asked Don and I were cleaning the building, and I went to try to put paper products into the bathrooms and stuff. And they wouldn't open. They had keys to them, and somebody said, well, you don't have to worry about that. Cotton Crawford, he does that on his own. And I don't see Prentice here this morning, but when we walk in and every morning, Prentice Ferris opens up the doors so when you can walk in. And we have so many people who send cards for birthdays and other things that are what I call helps. When I see your face on Sunday morning, it is a help to me. I get a positive reinforcement. When we are in Bible class together and there are questions asked and comments given and that sort of thing, it is a help to me. There's a lot of little things that we don't think of how this interaction between us helps us all. And there's a lot of things that goes on where we have people that are not, they're not prominent, but when we show up, the Lord's Supper is ready. When we go down for our Bible classes, the classes are there. There's decorations to inspire the kids, information there, worksheets to do, all kinds of things, activities planned, and there helps. And the point I want to get to you is sometimes when in this verse right here, it's talking about apostles and prophets and teachers and miracles, and then helps. It's in there too. Some of the things that you do maybe doesn't seem very, very consequential until it's not there. And so hopefully this year we can all try to be helps to each other, and it's not always the most flamboyant thing. It's some of the simplest things. As one of the things that is a help to me is before, even though it's a problem sometimes, before we begin services in here, is we have people around here talking. And it just shows the love and the care that we have. And sometimes you have to literally say, okay, it's time. And I get tickled at some of the folks who start scurrying back to their seats. But, they are involved in each other's lives. And one of the things that we all could be better at, and I'm one of those, is sometimes this side over here doesn't know this side over there, that maybe we need to walk across. Also, get here early enough that you've got time to do that, or stay after and try to find about folks in their lives, because they're going to give you the information you need about maybe some of the things that you can do to continue to build this local church and build the unity that we would have in here. So, think about being helps. And one of the reasons for this, so there be no divisions in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. And so those are goals that we can have. Those are resolutions that we can make, and we can do those things this next year. Ephesians said, "No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourished and cherisheth it." I get it right here. Cherishes it. The thing that we need to recognize is if we're in this body, this local body, we're supposed to nourish each other. We're not supposed to despise each other. We're supposed to have these relationships. And just as Christ does the church, because we are the members of his body, we're supposed to have that relationship. And through this, the peace of Christ will rule our hearts. And we need to be thankful for that we're in this body. Romans says this: since we have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, each of us is to exercise them accordingly. Now, there are very few things that I am really good at, but there are some things that I can do. If you need a beast of burden, I'm your man. I can do some of the simplest tasks for a very long time, as long as you keep me well fed and keep me there. But the thing is that all of us have different abilities and different gifts. Some of us are more capable in some areas. Some of us need to stretch ourselves. Sometimes we get stagnant, and so I think we need to think about, improving ourselves. And that is not. There's nothing age appropriate about that. That deals with all of us. If prophecy according to the proportion of his faith, if service in serving, he who teaches in his teaching, or he who exhorts in his exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy with cheerfulness. When you look at all those different things, those are things that I believe we all can do. I don't think there's anything that would exclude us if we look at and find our way to do that. For even as the body is one, it has many members. All the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, also is Christ. For by one Spirit we are all baptized into one body. This one Spirit is, should be a prevailing bond for us. And because whether we're Greeks or Jews, slaves or free, we are all under this one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. In Ephesians it says, he gave us some as apostles, some as prophets, and some as evangelists, some as pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints, for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ, until we attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Christ. These different gifts and things should equip us. It should help us attain. It should provide that unity and the knowledge so that we can all mature. We can all become stronger. And that should be one of our goals. And that's a resolution that I think if we're doing our studying and we're taking opportunity of Bible classes and maybe getting in situations where we work with someone in this congregation that we can find a mutual time. If we can do those things, we can all go stronger together. I go to a weight room, and there's a young lady that comes in there that is like an Olympic weightlifter. She does these power cleans and things online. It really looks as a coach, it almost looks unnatural. I'm not used to looking at a woman coming in and throwing 200-something pounds up. That just doesn't look natural. But she's really good at it. And one of the things that she had trouble when she got there, she kind of gotten stagnant, and that she hadn't been improving. And the young man that runs the gym is one of my former players, and he and I were talking about it. And he said that he had to try to teach her that you're working the same muscle groups, but there's some other things. He made her start doing abdominals, because the abdominals and other muscles will, if they're weak, it affects the other, if that makes any sense. And so one of the things that as we're trying to mature and trying to become more complete and exercising ourselves in areas that maybe we are weak in to improve the goals that we are looking for. All right, the second analogy was that of living stones. In 1 Peter 2, verses 4 through 6, living stones is used as a metaphor to describe Christians. And so when if we imagine ourselves as stones, that builds this spiritual house, does it matter if you're the prettiest? Now, I put this picture of a wall up here, and I looked at these. Does it really matter is there one up there that you think is prettier than the other? Is there one that's more colorful than the other? Is there one that would be more valuable than the other? What about the largest? And the thing I thought about, they all serve the same purpose, do they not? Aren't they all there working together to provide that, in this case for us, a spiritual wall? And even the smallest can be very important. Some of y'all probably remember the little Dutch boy with his finger stuck in the hole on the wall. It's amazing sometimes how, when one little rock comes out, how much problems that you can have here. But they all serve the same purpose. They are bound together. They have the same importance. Some people go to lectures. High school football coaches are no different. We call them clinics, and we go and we listen to people talk. And what it is you try to listen to other people to find out what they do that you can add to what you do so that you'll be as successful as they are, because the people that get to talk to you are not the people that go 0-10. They're the people that won state championships. A guy from Georgia comes in, and he was the head coach, but he was the defensive coordinator. And he got up to talk about his defense. So you take your notebook, you're taking all these notes, you're getting all the ideas that you can, and you're all excited. You write his name down, you write where he's from, so that you've got this information. So he gets up and he draws up his defense. And it was an 0-5-3 stack defense that I've seen for years and years. And he says, we gave up 2.5 points per game. We pitched 10 shutouts. And then he gave the really important statistic. He said 9 of our 11 starters signed SEC scholarships. That's pretty strong. These are great players. He said our nose guard caused 15 fumbles, 1 per game, by knocking the center in the quarterback and just picking up the ball. So he's talking about how good the players were, and this is where you know that the Jimmy Joes are better than the X's and O's. I had quit keeping notes by this time because I realized this was, he said, we stayed in the same defense the whole year. We never ran any stunts. We never did anything because the people were so good. And somebody says, well, what about the 2 guys that didn't sign scholarships? He says, well, this guy was 160 pounds, this guy was 160 pounds, and they think the reason that those people don't run to that side is because they're there, because they think they're that good. And the point is that in God's plan for us, we all are important. And we all have an active part. And we all can contribute and have that attitude that not that we're indispensable, not a pride thing, but the idea is that it is important for me to do some of these things that seem inconsequential to some other people. Are we a living stone or are we dead? I think I've used this analogy before, but there's a book and a movie called Tuck Everlasting. Some of y'all may have seen it. Some of y'all may have been forced to read the book. I don't know. But there's a statement, these are supposedly in Tuck Everlasting, these people have drank water that makes them live forever. And a lot of people think, well, that's great. In teaching kids, we would look at that. You're going to drink this, Ponce de Leon, fountain of youth type thing. And anyway, they can't die. And so they just keep existing. And the guy says, the dad says, a lot of people think this is great. He says, but we're like a rock that just doesn't do anything. And I thought, when I started thinking about that, I thought, well, it's because you're not serving God. You're not living. It's not about the fact that you're still living here in this life. It's about the fact that you don't have a purpose in life. Your purpose is to exist. And the thing is as the verses say here, we're to be living stones, lively stones. That changes the purpose or changes the emphasis on that. So do we want to be rocks that just exist? Or do we want to move past that? Living stones, wherefore laying aside all malice and all guile and hypocrisies and envies and all evil speakings, as newborn babes, desire the sincere milk of the word that ye may grow thereby. That's what living beings do. They grow. And we ought to have that desire. So it would be that you tasted that the Lord is gracious, to whom coming as unto a living stone, disallowed indeed of men, but chosen of God, and precious. Ye also as lively stones are built up into a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. The things that we're talking about trying to do in our lives this morning is about these spiritual sacrifices that as the local church here, that we can impact and that we can represent the Lord. A local church is known as a work. It shows the fruit of the Spirit. How can you show the fruit of the Spirit if you're not at work? It emulates Christ. It is our mission, whether it be benevolence, edification, evangelism, worship. And while I put evangelism, there's a thing that we can all do here. And I've not been very good at this through the years. I've gotten better. But we have folks that we don't know walk into this congregation and see it sometimes, and it's a shame if we don't recognize that and go and introduce ourselves. It's a shame, folks. It really is. And I'm for a long time I'm uncomfortable. It's not comfortable for me to walk up to someone that I don't know, but it's real easy for us to come in and get our seat. But these are folks that may need us. And we're setting an impression, and there are some folks that do that. I'm not getting up, but to me, we need to be better at that. It's part of evangelism, is it not? To go in there and check on somebody. A lot of times it's going to be somebody that's passing through. Sometimes it's not. And so I think that's one area that I think that we can be better at in our mission to this congregation. It's a testimony of our faith. It's a light to the community. It's a stand for the truth. it shows the fruit of the Spirit by what kind of fruit are we known by. It emulates Christ. Is Christ glorified by our work? Is it our mission? Do we have a purpose that is interwoven into our daily lives? Is the testimony of faith, what does our effort say about the right things? Or does the effort say the right things about our commitment to the Lord? Or are we covering ourselves under a basket? And bottom line, when it's stand for the truth, we have the courage of our convictions that are granted by the Scripture. Those are things that we all can improve on. As living stones, when we all work together as intended, others are brought to Christ. Others are helped through crisis, heartache, and turmoil. This congregation, with losses in the last few months and some of the difficulties that people are going through, we've endured a lot of things. And are we taking those opportunities to be the types of brothers and sisters, those fellow heirs, those people that share the same thing? Are we taking advantage of those to help others? Others are edified, built up, and exhorted. As I've told you, I'm a little different, but I may not be like you. But there are certain things that, for me, when I see those things, that edifies me. And just as simple as seeing your face is something that builds me up. God is glorified when we work together. Good is done. We can be assured because of the promise of God through His Son. So when you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are fellow citizens with the saints and are of God's household, having been built up the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ Jesus Himself being the cornerstone, in whom the whole building being fitted together is growing into a holy temple in the Lord. Beautiful language to describe what we are and what we should be aspiring to do. We have a great blend of younger and older folks. I'm still glad I'm on the younger side. But we have a great mix of young people here and older folks. The younger people bring some things, as I thought about it, that for me inspire me. There's always a freshness and energy about young people. When it gets right down to it. There seems to be an excitement. One of the things that I have trouble with, and maybe y'all do this, is there are things to me that are old hat. And so when it comes around, I can't find the excitement there. And then when young people have that excitement, sometimes I wonder what all the fuss is all about. But we need to recognize sometimes young people have that excitement because they haven't experienced it that many times. There's an innocence with young folks that is there. There's new methods and ideas. I hate to think, when I got here this morning, I needed a couple of tweakings of the thing. And, I'm sitting there and, a young man comes up and helps me do that. Seems that when young people have a confidence and a can-do attitude about things a lot of times. A lot of us folks with experience, we kill ourselves at the beginning, don't we? Well, I've tried that, or, I gave a little effort. Young people haven't experienced that. And so they somehow have the confidence and a can-do. There's a humility sometimes that you can find in there that's very special and necessary. For older folks, there should be a wisdom. Because we've been there, that blends together with some of the other things. We have experience, we have knowledge, we have patience, we have examples, or can be the examples for other people. Obviously, when you're older, you ought to be more patient. But one bad thing comes with us, sometimes we're just tired of them. And I have to throw this personal note. My grandkids, when things ain't going right, they have a little saying that we say, and it always makes us laugh. But when I see them whining or complaining, I say this to them. They say it back to me when they see things, and that's suck it up, Buttercup. The bottom line is we're tired, and maybe we're not what we used to be, but we can suck it up. We do recognize sometimes that we can actually do a better job, and we can push through that. Because of our experience, we ought to be able to do that. So there's no unemployment line in God's workforce. You ever thought about there's always work that needs to be done? So while planning to improve yourself in some way this year, as a member of this Lord's body at Gardendale, consider this. How am I going to grow and improve this year as a servant of Christ? That's a broad expanse. There's a lot of things that you can think of that maybe will be something that you can do, and look for those opportunities. I read this. It's hard to get yourself in shape spiritually if you only work out on Sunday, and recognize that your opportunities are not designated for this time frame only, even though this is an important time. There's 6 more days that goes along with that. While considering plans for home improvements, consider this. As a living stone supported by Christ, the chief cornerstone, how am I going to contribute this year to this spiritual house, a house not made with hands? So I hope that I've said something that maybe will encourage you to look at your lives and look at your spiritual lives and look for ways to serve God better and serve each other in this local congregation. And take the only I say the word risk, it's not a risk, but take the impotence to follow through with some of those things. And remember this, if I fail today, doesn't mean I have to fail tomorrow. There's a lot of people that do a resolution, they're doing really good, and then they have a bad day. Well, I'm done. I broke my your resolution is more than that. There's an expectation of God is that He knows we're going to fail. Are we going to continue in that? Are we going to turn around the next day and correct that and work in a way that pleases Him? So thank you. This has not been a sermon to teach you about the first principles of being a Christian. We have those in this congregation that may need to do that. Maybe it's time for you to become a Christian. And we'd like for you, if you have made those thoughts and you thought it through and you decide this is time to do it, we would love for you to do that now. No better time than right now. If there are those that maybe our lives are not what they ought to be, perhaps this is a time for us to make that change. Whether it's something publicly where you need to come forward or whether you can take care of something on your own. I suspect that there's a lot of good done. I hope that there's a lot of good done when you hear words from up here, not because I'm up here, but things that can inspire us to be better and help us to understand God's will, that we can take care of those things. Anyway, if we can help you in any way, please let it be known as we stand and sing.